take? What's it gonna take? Just 2 chords. Hey ho ho,
How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? I am so happy to be back with you. We're out of the 3 weeks. We're out of the 9 days. We're out of Tisha B'Av, which was yesterday, which was a long fast. Oh my gosh, I get a headache when I don't hydrate. I mean, I had such a migraine headache but for the last few hours of the day. But now that's past. The saddest day of the calendar is past. We're on our way up. Nowhere to go but up. Now we've got, 20 days in the month of Av, more or less. Then it's Elul. You know what? We do this in Elul. We do it every day. But I'm so happy to be with you, and I'm so excited. Let's just do one right now. Let's have a shofar blast for the accidental Talmudist community. And let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we do a little learning, some exciting learning on a Monday night? Let me get this over here. Okay, here we go. And hold on one second. Let me just get this going over here. It's been so many days. Let me just tell you what's going on. So we didn't have class Saturday night because we were in Tisha B'Av. And we didn't have class Sunday night because of Tisha B'Av. So we're 3 pages behind. Today we're going to do 2. And then tomorrow we'll do 2 with God's help. And then we will be caught up. So that is the plan. Who is with us as we do some learning, some beautiful learning on a Monday night? Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, Melissa in Great Neck, Stephen in Dover, New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey, Angela says good night, blessings, Patrice in Utah, Paula in Chicago, Bill in Missouri, Pauline in Arkansas, Gwen in Michigan, Paul in the Great Northwest, Lucy in Minnesota, Moisha in Brooklyn, Marianne in Medford, Carolyn in Raleigh, and Chris in Maryland. And Zach says, hey, Sal, always great to see you. Zach sending you a big hug and a big love. Over there on the YouTube side, James in Indianapolis, Gigi in British Columbia. All right. First of all, before I go any further, I want to tell you guys how much I love you. All right? I want to tell you how much I love you. I played in a charity golf tournament today for a beautiful organization, Tomche LA. They provide Shabbos meals for the food insecure. That's how they started. Now they provide thousands of Shabbos meals every week, and they run all kinds of other programs involving food, shelter, clothing. I mean, just really taking care of an enormous number of people. Beautiful cause. We had a beautiful day out on the links. Then I rushed home, drove an hour through traffic so I could be teaching this class. And what that means is that I didn't participate in the unlimited sushi cocktail hour and the steak dinner that follows. So that's how much I love you. All right. Okay, tonight's class is sponsored by Linda Fuqua. She actually sponsored a couple nights ago, but I want to give her credit for sponsoring tonight also. Why? Because her beautiful message, her dedication is from the nations to our local Levite who teaches us Torah. May you have a blessed day. And when I read that the other night, I started talking about why she said local Levite. She means me, I'm a Levite, etc. I talked about what Levites are. And then I forgot to come around and say what I normally say to anybody who dedicates a class, which is, Linda, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And we say amen. Okay. Right, so let's get to it. Where are we holding? So we're in Tractate Sukkah, the 7th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of Sukkah. So we're in chapter 1. Today, completing our discussion of the 3rd Mishnah, completing our discussion of the 4th Mishnah, and opening our discussion of the 5th Mishnah in chapter 1. Okay, so these will be pages 10 and 11. We're actually starting near the bottom of the B side of page 9. The 3rd Mishnah discussed this weird situation where you have one sukkah on top of another sukkah. Could this be a kosher sukkah? I mean, there's not really much problem with the upper sukkah, although as we'll see, there are situations where there is a problem with the upper sukkah. How could the lower sukkah be kosher? And there's going to be situations where the lower sukkah can be fit. And that's actually what we're talking about right now. Excuse me. The Mishnah continues. If one established a sukkah atop another sukkah, the upper sukkah is fit and the lower sukkah is unfit. That's what we would expect, because the whole idea is that the roofing, the schach, of a sukkah, which really is the distinctive feature of a sukkah, which we're commanded to dwell in during this festival in the fall. So the idea of the roofing, which is, we're going to be talking about what it has to be made of tonight, actually. But the idea is that the roofing is going to provide more shade than sunlight. And it's the roofing that has to do that. So if there's this whole other sukkah on top of the sukkah, that seems like it's going to complicate matters. And so the ruling of the Mishnah really makes an intuitive sense that the upper sukkah is going to be fit and the lower sukkah is going to be unfit, right? But the sages taught in a baraisa that the verse states, "In sukkahs shall you reside," Leviticus 23:42. "In sukkahs shall you reside, and not in a sukkah that is beneath another sukkah, and not in a sukkah that is beneath a tree, and not in a sukkah that is inside a house," right? So that makes sense with what we've been learning already. It has to be the roofing itself that provides more shade than sunlight, but some sunlight comes through, and not some other material or the tree branches or a different sukkah or the roof of a house. You can't build your sukkah indoors, or the roofing will not be doing its job. Now, the Gemara questions that derivation. Can we really learn that from "in sukkahs shall you reside"? On the contrary, the term "in sukkahs," right, plural, indicates two. And the conclusion should be that one sitting inside a sukkah that's beneath a sukkah does fulfill the mitzvah. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, although the term is vocalized in the plural, basukot, basukas, is written about it, and it is written in the Torah without the vav, so it's pronounced like it's plural, but whereas normally this plural word in Hebrew would have a vav for the O sound, here it doesn't, so really it's singular. So Rav Yirmiyah says, there are times when both of these sukkahs, one atop the other, are fit. And there are times when both the sukkahs are unfit. There are times when the lower sukkah is fit and the upper sukkah is unfit. And there are times when the lower sukkah is unfit and the upper sukkah is fit, which is how the Mishnah rules. So now we see that there's more nuances to this situation. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said, and by the way, just so you can picture this a little bit, there's a picture here. I'll hold it up to the camera. Hopefully you can kind of get this idea. This is what a sukkah on top of a sukkah could look like. All right. So what is this situation? The Gemara elaborates. So there are times when both of the sukkahs, one on top of the other, both of them are fit. What are the circumstances? In a case where the lower sukkah, its sunlight is greater than its shade, rendering the sukkah unfit, and in the upper sukkah, its shade is greater than its sunlight, rendering the sukkah fit. And the roofing of the upper sukkah is within 20 cubits of the ground. In that case, the roofing of the upper sukkah is effective for both the upper sukkah and the lower one. The lower one is an unfit sukkah on its own, but it ends up being it's like a two-story sukkah beneath a proper roof. And as long as that upper roof is less than 20 cubits above the ground of the lower sukkah, both of these are going to be fit by virtue of the roofing of the upper sukkah. There are times when both of the sukkahs are unfit. What are the circumstances? It is in a case where in both sukkahs their shade is greater than their sunlight. But the upper one, But the upper one is more than 20 cubits above the roofing of the lower sukkah, rendering it unfit. Since the roofing of the upper sukkah is unfit and it casts shade over the lower sukkah is also unfit. Both of them are relying on the roof of the upper sukkah, and that roof is too high off the ground, and so neither sukkah works. There are times when the lower sukkah is fit and the upper one is unfit. Now that's surprising. How are we going to get that situation? What are the circumstances? It is a case where the lower sukkah, its shade is greater than its sunlight, rendering the sukkah fit, and the upper sukkah, its sunlight is greater than its shade, and it is therefore insignificant, and the roofing of both is within 20 cubits of the ground. So here the upper roof is no good. It allows more sunlight to pass through than shade. So that upper sukkah, no good. But now all that light, which is just passing through the upper sukkah, is being blocked, more shade than sunlight, by the roof of the lower sukkah. So the lower sukkah is fit. And there are times when the upper sukkah is fit and the lower sukkah is unfit. What are the circumstances? It is a case where in both sukkahs their shade is greater than their sunlight, but the roofing of the upper sukkah and the roofing of the upper sukkah is within 20 cubits of the roofing of the lower one. In this case, the upper sukkah is fit, while the lower sukkah is a sukkah beneath the sukkah, and it is unfit because it's that upper roof that's really providing more shade than light. The lower sukkah now is nullified. The Gemara asks, well, this is obvious. There is nothing novel in any of these scenarios. The Gemara answers, it was necessary for the Tana, the rabbi of the Mishna, to mention the case where the lower sukkah is fit and the upper sukkah is unfit, as it contains a novel element. And lest you say, let us issue a decree and deem the lower sukkah unfit, as perhaps the unfit roofing of the upper sukkah joins together with the fit roofing of the lower sukkah and renders it unfit as well. And therefore the Tana teaches us that the two roofings do not join together, and the upper roofing does not render the lower sukkah unfit. And that is as much as we're going to do in our discussion of Mishnah number 3. We now proceed to Mishnah number 4. If one spread a sheet over the roofing as protection for those sitting in the sukkah due to the sun, or if one spread a sheet beneath the roofing as protection due to the falling leaves, or if one spread a sheet as a canopy over the frame of a four-poster bed, the area in the sukkah beneath the sheets is unfit. Now, this makes perfect sense. It's the roofing of the sukkah that is the distinctive feature of a sukkah. That roofing needs to provide more shade than sunlight, and it does the job. So now if you're adding this other interposition, a sheet, right, some kind of a bed sheet, either above the sukkah, so it's going to provide extra shade, above the roofing, or under the roofing to prevent leaves, right? The roofing is made often of branches with leaves on them. So if you want to catch those falling leaves from disturbing the occupants, now you've got this sheet as an interposition, providing shade for the people beneath that sheet. And so that area of the sukkah is not valid. Now, we want to sleep in the sukkah if at all possible, right? Ideally, you dwell in the sukkah for all 8 days. And so that means, right, that you sleep in it and eat in it. Not everybody is able to sleep in their sukkah, but at least you should take your meals in it. But if you are sleeping in the sukkah, okay, so you bring your bed in there. If your bed is a 4-poster bed with a canopy, that is going to render the sleeping under that canopy. Now you're not fulfilling the obligation to dwell in the sukkah because the roof of the sukkah is not what's over you. The canopy of the bed is what's over you, and that's going to be an unfit area of the sukkah. Now, in the first 2 cases, because the sheet is susceptible to ritual impurity, it renders the otherwise fit roofing unfit. In the case of the canopy, one is not sitting under the roofing of the sukkah, rather he is sitting inside a tent. Right, so in the first 2 cases, it's like that sheet becomes part of the roofing and it renders the roofing unfit. In the canopy situation of the bed, you haven't ruined the roofing of the sukkah, but you're not sitting under the roofing, you're sitting under the canopy of your bed, and it's as if you pitched a tent inside the sukkah, and that would be invalid for fulfilling the mitzvah. However, one may spread the sheet over the frame of a 2-post bed, which has 1 post in the middle of each end of the bed, and when spreading the sheet over the post, it forms an inclined rather than a flat roof, right? So the point is this: if you are sleeping in a bed underneath the roofing of the sukkah, and your bed has a canopy that looks like this, so that's going to be like a tent, and you're under this canopy, and you're not under the roofing. But if the canopy of your bed is like this, sort of like a military pup tent, right? Then this is not going to render it unfit. Why? Because these are so steep that they're considered like inclined walls and not a roof. Right? And basically this line up here, as long as it's narrower than 1 handbreadth, it's not going to invalidate you being shaded from the sun by the roofing of the sukkah, as we'll see. When spreading the sheet over the post, it forms an inclined rather than a flat roof, and a tent with an inclined roof is not considered a significant structure. Right, so those kind of pup tents, right, that you kind of Boy Scouts use, like just to cover the sleeping bag, right, and it's just an A-frame, that's not considered a significant structure. That's especially good if you're going to bring mosquito netting, right, with you into the sukkah. It can't be flat, but if it's just very steep like that, and the bar at the top is less than 1 handbreadth wide, it's going to work. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara. Rav Chisda said, the sages taught the ruling that the sheet renders the sukkah unfit only when it is placed underneath the roofing due to the falling leaves. However, if his intent was to spread the sheet for decorative purposes to beautify the sukkah, then it is not in the category of roofing and the sukkah is fit. Now, you really wouldn't want to drape this kind of sheet for decorative purposes so that it's kind of flat above you and under the roof of the sukkah. You just don't want to get involved with that because it's very problematic. But if you're kind of draping a sheet, with a nice like arch like this, and it's kind of over against the walls or even in the middle, but it's occupying very little area, right? It's more like just a decorative thing, then that's what they're really talking about. That's not going to render the roofing of the sukkah unfit, right? If you've just got like a situation, where like you're kind of doing just a decorative sheet hanging down from the roof. But even this, you wouldn't want it to have an area like that, right? You really want it to be more, kind of like, just kind of like something like that, right? But not like that. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now this is obvious, as due to the falling leaves is what we learned in the Mishnah. And the Gemara answers, well, lest you say that the same is true, i.e. the sukkah is unfit, even when the sheet was spread to beautify the sukkah. And the reason that the Mishnah teaches specifically that the case where one spread the sheet due to the falling leaves is that the Mishnah teaches the matter, spreading a sheet in the sukkah in the manner which it typically occurs. And Rav Chisda teaches us that the formulation of the Mishnah is precise and the halacha applies specifically to the case cited. So if one spread the sheet for decorative purposes, it does not render the sukkah unfit. So you could technically, have this kind of spread out sheet. But if you had any kind of intention that it would catch, falling fibers or leaves from the roofing, and that it would be any kind of a protection to the people underneath it, that would definitely invalidate the sukkah. It would have to be a specific intention only for the beauty of the sukkah, that you could hang this sheet underneath, and then it won't invalidate the roofing. But like I said, it's problematic because you're going to be aware that it's going to perform that function of making sure nothing falls from the roof. And as soon as you have that thought, it would invalidate the sukkah. So don't hang a sheet underneath the roofing. Now, the Gemara suggests, let us say that the following Tosefta supports the opinion of Rav Chisda. If one roofed the sukkah in accordance with its halachic requirements, and he decorated it with colorful curtains and sheets, and hung in it ornamental nuts and peaches, almonds and pomegranates and grape branches and wreaths of stalks of grain and wines and oils and vessels full of flour, it is prohibited to derive benefit and use them until the conclusion of the last day of the festival. Sukkot takes place in the fall, right? So it's kind of a harvest festival as well. And very often people would decorate their sukkahs, especially in ancient times, with the produce of the field and the vineyard and the orchard. And so you would have literally grapes that you've cut, and bunches of grapes and other kinds of fruit and pomegranates and nuts, and even like skeins of wine, etc., all hanging from the roof out of gratitude to God for all this plenty that he provided to us. Now that's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to decorate the sukkah. But you must understand that once you decorate your sukkah with those fruits and nuts and bottles or skins of wine or whatever, now they're part of the sukkah. So you can't eat that stuff during sukkah. So you can't eat that stuff until the festival is over. Why? Because they're part of the sukkah. And that means that because they're decorating the sukkah, they've been consecrated for use in fulfilling the mitzvah. You put them up there to beautify the sukkah, so they're enhancing your fulfillment of the commandment to dwell in the sukkah. That means you can't eat them, right? You can't eat them during the festival. And if, before he hung those decorations, he stipulated with regard to them that he will be permitted to use them even during the festival, well, then everything is according to his stipulation, as he is permitted to use them. So if he said, okay, I'm hanging this up here for now, it's pretty, but I'm hanging it only until I'm going to eat it. This is for eating. It's not, its major purpose is for eating during the festival, not for decorating. I'm just hanging it here. Right? That's different. Now you see how his intent governs. If he just hangs that stuff in the roof without stipulating that he is going to eat it during the festival, then it's assumed to be a decoration and it's consecrated for the use of the mitzvah of the sukkah during the festival. But if he stipulates with a full intent, he even says it out loud, I'm going to eat this stuff, I'm just hanging it here temporarily, then he could eat it during the festival. Now, the Gemara rejects this. That this Baraisa does not prove with respect to the sheet that we were talking about. The Gemara rejects that there is no proof from this Tosefta, as perhaps the reference is to sheets spread on the side of the sukkah. However, if they are spread beneath the roofing, it renders the sukkah unfit. You could say, well, I'm stipulating that they're for the decoration. That does seem to work, right? But it's problematic. That's why I say just don't hang a sheet beneath the ceiling during Sukkot. Apropos decorations, it was stated, sukkah decorations do not diminish the height of the sukkah. Decorations that are hanging from the roofing are not considered part of the structure, and therefore they do not diminish the height of the sukkah. If the roofing is more than 20 cubits above the ground, the decorations hanging within 20 cubits of the ground do not render the sukkah fit. Now, Rav Ashi said, however, if the decorations are spread on the side of the roof, they are considered part of the structure and they diminish the area. If the decorations render the interior of the sukkah less than 7 by 7 handbreadths, then the sukkah is unfit. So decorations hung on the edges of the roofing can serve to because they're going to sort of build out the walls. And so they might narrow the sukkah, and if they bring it so narrow that now we don't have a sufficient minimum area of the sukkah, they might render the sukkah unfit for not having a sufficient area. However, hanging down from the ceiling doesn't diminish the height. So if the roofing was more than 20 cubits above the ground, then the fact that you hung a bunch of decorations within the 20 cubit maximum height wouldn't render the sukkah fit. The sukkah's roofing has to be less than 20 cubits above the ground, and these decorations don't affect that. The Gemara relates with regard to Minyamin, the servant of Rav Ashi, that his shirt became wet, and he spread it over the sukkah to dry it. And Rav Ashi said to him, take it down, so that people will not say that they are roofing the sukkah with an item that is susceptible to ritual impurity, to tumah. And the servant said to him, but don't they see that it is wet and understand that I only placed it up there to dry, not to become part of the roofing? And Rav Ashi replied, take it down once it is dry, is what I am saying to you, as then people are apt to think that it is part of the roofing. So now we're starting to get into what can be used in the schach, what can be used in the roofing. An item that is susceptible to ritual impurity cannot be used. So what is susceptible to tumah? Clothing. Clothing can become tameh. Vessels can become tameh. But raw wood or branches or vines or leaves or palm branches, etc., just cut from a tree, do not become impure. Food can become impure, but branches and just raw lumber cannot. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, it is permitted to sleep in a bed with netting inside the sukkah, even though the bed has a roof, provided that the netting is not more than 10 handbreadths higher than the bed. In that case, the netting is not considered a tent in and of itself. Come in here. One who sleeps in a bed, right, with netting, like mosquito netting. One who sleeps in a bed with netting inside the sukkah did not fulfill his obligation, contrary to the statement that Rav Yehuda cited in the name of Shmuel. And the Gemara answers, with what are we dealing with here? It is a case where the netting is more than 10 handbreadths higher than the bed, and it is considered a tent in and of itself. The Gemara raises an objection from a Mishna. One who sleeps beneath the bed in the sukkah did not fulfill his obligation, as the height of a typical bed is less than 10 handbreadths. Apparently, even if the covering beneath which one is sleeping is less than 10 handbreadths high, it is a tent in and of itself, and he does not fulfill his obligation. And the Gemara answers, didn't Shmuel interpret the Mishnah as referring to the case of a bed 10 handbreadths high? Therefore, one who sleeps beneath the bed did not fulfill his obligation, right? So if this canopy is more than 10 handbreadths high, okay, now it renders like you're sleeping in a tent inside the sukkah. You didn't fulfill your obligation. Less than 10 handbreadths high, it's like it's just part of the bed. Come in here, that which is taught in the Mishnah. Or if one spread a sheet as a canopy over the frame of a 4-post bed, the area in the sukkah beneath the sheet is unfit. Apparently a bed with certain types of netting is unfit. And the Gemara answers there too. It is a case where the posts are 10 handbreadths high. What is the law? A bed with netting inside the sukkah. If one sleeps in the sukkah in a bed with netting, and the netting is not 10 handbreadths high, or it does not have a roof 1 handbreadth wide, he does fulfill his obligation in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. Right, so 10 handbreadths high, if the canopy above your bed is only about 10 handbreadths high, okay, then it's just like a sleeping bag. It's not really considered its own structure that is nullifying the roofing above you. or right, if it's only one handbreadth, less than one handbreadth wide, like I showed you that A-frame, that also is not considered a significant structure. And that concludes our discussion of the fourth Mishnah. Now we open our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Or this is Mishnah 5, and then we'll do a little bit of the Gemara. Mishnah 5, if one trellised climbing plants such as a grapevine or a gourd plant or ivy over a sukkah while they were still attached to the ground and then added roofing atop them, the sukkah is unfit. If the amount of fit roofing was greater than the plants attached to the ground, or if he cut the climbing plants so that they were no longer attached to the ground, it is fit. And this is the principle with regard to the roofing of a sukkah. Anything that is susceptible to ritual impurity, e.g., for example, vessels, or its growth is not from the ground, like animal hides, one may not roof his sukkah with it. And anything that is not susceptible to ritual impurity and its growth is from the ground, one may roof his sukkah with it. And that is the law. So the roofing material of a sukkah has to grow from the ground. You can't use wool, you can't use animal hides. It has to be plant matter, all right? And it cannot be fashioned into vessels, which could become tameh. It just has to be the raw material that grew from the ground. And it can't still be attached to the ground. So the example that they're giving, you can imagine, in fact, my mother-in-law has a garden behind her house with like a nice sort of patio area with a nice trellis over it. And she's got grapevines, these vines that have grown into the trellis and covered the area above the patio. That looks like a sukkah. It's very beautiful, but you would not fulfill your obligation with it as a sukkah because those trellised plants are still attached to the ground. How could you make it into a sukkah? One way would be if you cut all those vines. My mother-in-law would not appreciate that, right? Then they would all die, but once they're cut, they're not attached to the ground, then they could be used as roofing material for the sukkah. Or if you just had a few of these vines growing through the roof area, but the majority of the roofing material was made from branches or palm leaves or stuff like that that had been cut from the ground. And the stuff that was interwoven into it that's living is really just serving as a decoration, and it does not contribute any significant amount to the shade that the roofing provides, right? The roofing materials that are up there have to provide more shade than sunlight without the participation of these vines, which are still attached to the ground. Gemara. And I'm actually almost done, so if you've got questions or comments, get them in there. We're on page 11 now. The Gemara to Mishnah number 5. Rav Yosef sat before Rav Huna, and he sat and said, citing the Mishnah, or if he cut them, it is fit, right? These trellised climbing plants as ivy or vines or whatever, if that was providing the roofing, it was attached to the ground, not fit. But if you cut them, then it is fit. That's what the Mishnah said. And he added, and Rav said that it is not enough merely to cut the climbing plants. One is obligated to move the branches, thereby performing an action with the branches in order to render the roofing fit. When he placed the climbing plants atop the sukkah, they were attached and therefore unfit roofing. When he ultimately cut them, it was as if the sukkah were roofed by itself. So in that case, the sukkah is unfit due to the principle, prepare it, and not from that which has already been prepared, derived from the verse, you shall prepare for you the festival of Sukkot. Right? So when it was still attached to the ground, if you then train those vines over the sukkah, right, you didn't do anything because they're still attached to the ground. Then you cut the plants. Now the Mishnah says you're done. Now it is a fit sukkah. Rav says, yeah, but when you roofed it, it wasn't a sukkah. Now you cut the vines, and it's as if the sukkah roofed itself. What you should then do is shift those vines a little bit, so that you really did roof your sukkah with proper material for roofing of a sukkah. Now that they're cut vines, you could use them. They're no longer attached to the ground. So you should just rearrange them a little bit if when you initially roofed them, they were still attached to the ground. That's the opinion of Rav. Rav Huna said to Rav Yosef, Shmuel stated this law. Rav Yosef turned his face away in anger and said to him, did I say to you that Shmuel did not say it? Rav said it, and Shmuel said it as well. What is your point? Rav Huna said to him, this is what I am saying to you, that Shmuel said it, yes, but not Rav, as Rav deems the roofing fit merely by cutting them without moving them. Right? So according to Rav Huna, who's talking to Rav Yosef, he says, you cited it wrong. You cited the opinions wrong. Shmuel is the one who said, if you roofed it with vines attached to the ground, it's not enough to cut them. You have to rearrange them as well. Rav said, if you cut them, you're good. It's done, just like the Mishna says. Where does Rav Huna get this? As in that incident where Rav Amram the Pious cast the sky blue dye, i.e. the ritual fringes, upon the garment of the people of his household. So now what's going to happen is they're going to look to tzitzis, right? So the tzitzis that I wear under my garment, right? That on all four corners, there are these fringes. So these are the ritual fringes which we're commanded to attach to our clothing. Men are commanded to attach. So when you create the tzitzis, right? When you're making this garment with tzitzis on it, what they're going to say is you have to actually intend to create tzitzis and intend to create proper tzitzis. You've got to create the threads of that tzitzis for the purpose of tzitzis, or it's not going to count as tzitzis. So in that incident, Rav Amram the Pious cast the sky blue dye. Right? There's a commandment to put one of the threads should be blue. That commandment actually was set aside over 1,000 years ago because we lost access to the proper sky blue dye. Now that's come back because people are pretty sure that they've identified the correct source. It's a kind of snail which provides that dye, and they're able to make the dye again. Not everybody holds by that opinion, and that's why usually in terms of the tzitzis underneath the garment, that's usually all white. And most prayer shawls also have all white tzitzis, but some people are using the blue thread in their tzitzis. I actually have that on my talis. Let's continue. So, however, Rav Amram the Pious, he attached them, but he did not cut the ends of their strands prior to tying them. In other words, he took a single string, folded it a number of times, inserted it into the hole in the garment. Since the fringes were uncut when he tied them, he was uncertain whether they were fit for use in fulfilling the mitzvah due to the principle, prepare it, and not from that which has already been prepared. Right? So he took one thread and he went in and out a bunch of times, held it out long, but it was still one thread. The tzitzis has to be 4 threads, which are doubled over to become 8. So he's not sure if the fact that he cut them after he tied them might render them no good. Rav Amram came before Rav Chiya bar Ashi and he asked him about the legal status of those ritual fringes. And he said to him that this is what Rav said. One cuts them into separate strands and then they are fit. There is no need to remove them, cut them, and reattach them to the garment as separate strands. So apparently, according to Rav, their cutting is their preparation. Cutting them qualifies them as the cutting qualifies as active preparation of the fringes. It's okay that when you first threaded them, it was all one string, and then you cut it. The cutting is what prepares it for proper use as fringes. And here too, in the case of the roofing of the Sukkah, Rav holds their cutting is their preparation. No further action is required. So in this case where you took vines or ivy or grapevines that were growing from the ground and you worked them over the roofing of the Sukkah and then you cut them, it's a legit Sukkah according to Rav because the cutting is all you needed to do. Shmuel says after you cut them, you need to rearrange them a little bit so that you were actually roofing the Sukkah with material that was fit to be roofing material, that the cutting wasn't enough according to Shmuel. And then And then it turns out, well, can you cut the ritual fringes after they've been attached? Actually, no. So the law about cutting, it does work with the ivy or the vine over the sukkah. It does work, but with the fringes, it doesn't. The law on this is one is required to sever the ends of the ritual fringes to create 8 separate ends before tying them to the corner of the garment. If he ties the strands to the corner and only then severs them, the ritual fringes are unfit due to the principle prepare it and not from that which has already been prepared, in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel and contrary to the opinion of Rav, whose opinion was rejected. So what about in the case of the sukkah? Can we put over these vines? If one trellised a grapevine, no item that is attached to the ground is fit for roofing of the sukkah. Okay, we know that, but what about if you cut it? What about if you cut it? So we're not sure yet. We're not sure yet if that's going to work according to Shmuel. And that's where we're going to leave off today. Okay, let's see if you've got questions or comments for me. Second, let me get this up and in front. It's a little hot in my office, I will admit. Okay, Sharon. Why would netting be unacceptable under any configuration? Netting is an open weave fabric that doesn't block the light hardly at all. It's not like a sheet, it's sheer. So here it seems that the issue isn't whether it passes light or not, but whether it's a significant structure or not, right? So if it's that 4-poster bed and what you hang over it, even if it's sheer, even if it's netting, even if it's fish netting, which really is like, just totally passes light through it, it's still going to be deemed a significant structure. And I think that's why it doesn't work. And since Sharon says, can someone sleep under the bed itself as protection from rain, etc.? So the answer is, they gave it, right? If the bed itself is more than 10 handbreadths above the ground, then no, you can't sleep under the bed. But if the bed itself is less than 10 handbreadths above the ground, then you could sleep under the bed because it's not considered a structure, not some kind of a tent, right? Not any kind of structure that you're underneath it because it's less than 10 handbreadths high. And finally, Sharon asks, how did he tie the tzitzis without cutting them? So what I could imagine is, right, like, like you take one piece of string and it goes like this and like this and like this and like this. So it looks like 4 strands, but it's all still connected in one strand. Then you could take that thing, right, thread it through the hole, fold it over. Now it looks like 8 strands, but it's still all one string until you cut it. And that, we've now learned, the halacha is no good. You have to have 4 separate strands before you put them through the hole. Okay, so that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Tuesday, regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And we'll do a double daf again so that we get back on the schedule. Have a terrific night, my holy sisters and brothers.